That's why they knew he was coming.
Well, this one here mentions buildings, so now we're getting into things. So now we're getting into the where do the buildings come from type of territory. So this is from the Registrum Energy Perpetuae. So this is about perpetual energy. Okay, and where it comes from, this is from Kircher's Notebooks of the Pontifical Gregorian University. So someone go find out if this is true. I can't have time to do it here right now, but this is supposedly the claim that's written in this notebook. The devices employed in the Northern Sanctuary utilize principles lost since antediluvian times. Primary among these is the perpetual lamp, which draws energy from the Earth's magnetic currents through lodestone arranged in precise geometric patterns. According to the transformed ones who revealed these technologies, such devices powered their cities through the millennial reign, requiring no fuel or maintenance. So extremely geometrically patterned formed buildings, like a cathedral, let's say, which is nothing but pure geometry made manifest, were used as perpetual energy manifesting devices which pulled energy from the ether. And it's an old technology which had been used since time immemorial, even before the flood. So that's been used, saying, isn't it? Since time immemorial, basically.
Are you still in the beginning section, or have you moved down? To
these are just the beginning open. This is the opening before we get even to the contents of it. These are the revealed.
Just because people can search these, but just these are the ones, as far as I know, that are like snippets pulled from other people that have done the research. You can't actually. These are the ones that you have to have clearance to go down. They're classified.
Mm-hmm.
The actual documents. So
this is the people who have gone in to see the documents have come out and written this about what they saw, basically.
Yeah. So they were writing a book on something, and then a lot of documents will be reviewed, right? But if you go look at the date that they were all classified, it's all in the 1500s, coincidentally, that they classified all these 1,000-year reign, millennium, or Satan's little, like, being released and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting, the date that they decided to classify all that.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this too? So, okay, let's say right now it's all made up. It's all just AI, just imagining things. What do they call it? Apparitions or something. Who did this? Because this is really weird. Because I think that, to me, what we've been talking about recently, I think when I had Jason Jack on last week, we were talking about, isn't it interesting that, like, the short season eschatological view is like the newest one, right? Does anyone doubt that? Everyone's saying, like, there's this new thing going around.
Mm-hmm.
So did somebody in the past year, when we've been talking about this, like, Matt, did they try to go reprogram AIs and put out a bunch of false rabbit trails, bunch of breadcrumbs to places that go nowhere? It's really odd that this does make so much sense, and it's so much on the nose that there's so much different varying accounts. It's not one account. This is a bunch of them. And they all make sense what we're talking about. Like, to me, so if it was fake, it would take somebody, a nefarious actor behind us, to go just tell us what we want to hear. And they would have to really know what we want to hear, because they'd have to know all the stuff that we talk about, which obviously the people try to debunk us, they don't even know. Either way, this is really, really interesting. It's really weird if it's not true, and it's really, really weird if it is.
It's
yes, they weird. All believe this is the oldest eschatology. That this is what they believed. Like, all of them in the early days, this is what they believed. They were, premillennialists. Understandably so, because they were the ones being told it was coming soon, right? So that's what I would say. This is biblical eschatology, just in the same way as biblical cosmology. That's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, like I said, somebody at some point was a futurist and was correct to be one in the past.
Yeah, it's kind of sure.
And there have been, like I said, people who
are called the apostles.
Well, exactly. But now, obviously, if we are done with that and that time has passed, then the eschatology changes with each era, with the different peoples. And this would be ours now. This is what we have to deal with. This is our story, and what's coming next for us is the end of the little season and the Gog-Magog war, and that's what we should be preparing for as people who obviously follow Christ and have made our choice to choose him over Satan in this time. This stuff I'm reading here is just
Well, that's the thing. That's what I was saying. So it's kind of interesting, even just based on the current chronology we have. So they basically saying like, so the 1st century to like the 4th century, you have people believing in the whole, they're premillennialist.
Mhm.
And then from 500, from the 6th century onward, everyone was basically a amillennialist.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until like the 1800s that preterism and premillennialism was reintroduced,
Mhm.
which would have been right around the time that the little season would have started.
That's it. It's
I
like
think that's really, I think the timing is really interesting. Yeah. So the people who are teaching an amillennialist doctrine into the 1800s, they were wrong, but they were not wrong. They were only wrong because they didn't realize what had shifted at that time.
They also had amnesia like the rest of us. The history had been hidden by that point, and everything had been changed. Even they, didn't know how to make sense of everything going on around them. So they probably said, "Well, Jesus Christ is ruling for eternity in a ethereal sense, forever and ever. We're always in the millennial reign or something," because they didn't know how to explain what's around them, and everything had been buried and hidden, and all these books had clearly just disappeared into the Vatican vaults by this point. So it was kind of the information was scarce, and we have a lot of ideas of mass migrations, forced migrations of people, genocides, all sorts of things. We're going civil wars, just the complete destruction of old empires, and a power vacuum was clearly created at the end of the millennial reign. Because what we're reading here is everybody at the end of the millennial reign who knew Christ was there and knew about the saints got up and left, and they went north. And
Maybe that's why they needed orphan trains,
because the kids were left behind.
because there was no good way they said, "See you kids." No, but I mean there was not enough people, so obviously they were. I don't know. The interesting part about that is that what you were saying about like the amillennialists and even like the people who argue against us, they'll say, well, who said that the millennial reign was going to end? It's like, well, the millennial reign has to end, but we're not saying the kingdom ended.
No.
The only thing that we're saying is that's why the amil position doesn't really make a lot of sense, is because it clearly shows a period where the devil is locked up and then let back out. So it says 1,000 years, so I believe it's 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So
we call it
that,
millennial
we
reign.
also believe that Christ is king, right?
Yeah, well, we call it a millennial reign, but what we are talking about is a time in human history where the devil's locked up for 1,000 years.
Yes.
And that gives us the ability to be unhindered by the adversary, with Christ at the helm and his saints ruling over us, righteousness for 1,000 years. So we call it the millennial reign of Christ, because we don't want to talk about Satan or give him the credit. It's just that he's gone for 1,000 years, thank God, that type of situation. But it says he gets released after those 1,000 years, and you can only assume, with the adversary around whispering in everyone's ear again, everything would just collapse into chaos for whoever stayed behind. Because not everybody clearly made that pilgrimage before the gates shut in the north. A lot of them may have said, no, I'm not leaving my home, I'm staying right here. We know there were people who were living during this time who did live in rebellion. We know there were people.
You know what? Maybe those Left Behind movies were really about the fact that everyone just left.
Well, maybe some people said, I'd rather rule here as a king with Satan than be a servant in the city of God. Maybe some of them actually felt that way, So they
Left
stayed
Behind was like, see you kids, we're out of here.
Maybe it could have been that people, family members were becoming glorified saints and transforming before their very eyes, and they weren't, because they hadn't believed or entered the kingdom in their hearts. They hadn't believed or let Jesus in or the Holy Spirit do his work. They hadn't accepted Christ's offer, so they never had that opportunity to become transfigured and make it to the kingdom, into the gates. And maybe people were left behind by family members. He came.
I'm just cracking up by just thinking about, like, if you don't clean your room, we're leaving you.
Yeah, if they're saying that, they probably wouldn't get transformed, would they?
No, probably not. Every now and then you got to throw a thread out there to make the kids pay attention.
I wanted to make 2 quick points. So if you go down to category 1, the first one is a great example of it. There's this calendar called the Seleucid, I don't know how to pronounce it, Seleucid calendar. But it says in the year 848, but then it says according to the Seleucid calendar, it's 536, 537. So I'm wondering if that calendar is actually more correct for our date, because that's showing the year without the sun, which we're assuming is 536, 537.
Mhm.
So some of these accounts will say like 7 or 800 for these events. So it might actually be according to this calendar. So if it says 800, this apocalyptic event happened, it might actually mean according to that, whatever that calendar is. I don't know if I've ever even heard of that calendar.
Seleucid calendar. I've not heard of that one myself.
Yeah.
Like the first millennium we know is a mess in terms of timelines and dating. And that, like I said, the work of Gunnar Heinzen has already told us and explained that they have botched that massively. You know, that we have no idea how long that time period actually was. The whole 1,000 years we call the first millennium might only literally just be 300 years worth of history. That's all it is, and it was the Armageddon event, basically. From Christ to destruction of the temple, to the beginning of the millennial reign, to the tribulation event. Maybe 250 years, 300 years max, you know, but it's not 1,000 years worth of history there. So, you know, what we call 536 is actually zero.
Yeah, it's probably,
you know?
yeah. I would say it's closer to like 100-ish, maybe.
Maybe 100, yeah, or maybe like 70 AD with the temple and not long after the temple destruction, something like that, yeah. We don't really know, but we know it's been just stretched into a non-existent time period, you know, and like I said, realistically, if Gunnar Heisen's right, this isn't the year 2025. This is, what is this now? The year 1325 or something like that, or 13, is it something about that? You know, to take 700 years off?
Yeah. I'm comfortable saying like somewhere between like 13 and 15.
Something like, yeah. So like I said, 70 AD, destruction of the temple, 1,000 years, 1,070, and we've been in the little season for maybe 200 years, 250 years. That's about it, roughly. That's our rough, real timeline. But like I said, when I see 536, I am really thinking 70 AD to 100 AD. That's we would traditionally understand it. Something like that is the real time zone here. But this goes in the face of all secular history. Everything we've been taught, this is just not allowed. What we're saying here is, nope, you're crazy, shut up, you lunatics. Right? That's not the official narrative.
You're right.
You know, and
some of these are in the heretic section of, like, when you go to the hagiographies, it'd be like, oh, this is the heretic section. No, this is
the heretic section.
It sounds like the true story, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's read this one. So in the year 848, the Seleucid calendar 536, there was a sign from the sun, the like of which had never been seen or reported before. The sun became dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours only, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Everyone declared that the sun would never recover its full light again. The fruits did not ripen. The swine tasted like sour grapes. And I imagine this as every single volcano went off. The whole sky is just now covered in ash. That's what I imagine this to be. And I think
I know we read that account, that very account. There was there was not a lot written, but that was one of the things we read.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is not contested even by modern historians. This happened. The sun went out for like 18 months.
I thought it was interesting. One of the sources was named John from Ephesus. I just always thought that was really weird. It was almost sound like,
well, not
that. Was it that John? Is it the John, the beloved John? It could have been.
It could have been. We're speculation on this one now, but maybe it's around if we squash the timeline down. Yeah, it may have been him talking about this. Who knows?
Well, John, if you believe what the Bible says, that he was not going to taste death until Jesus' return.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have written something before he left.
Yeah.
Because we're told the last thing he wrote was the book of Revelation. But if he was there till then, he might have said, hey.
One interesting thing about this, the whole idea that volcanoes went off. Even Gunnar Heinzen was saying these cataclysmic events, he's equated to maybe the Icelandic volcano coming off because it had its effect all the way into China. And it seems like the whole world after this was plunged into like a mini ice age. Because there was just no sunlight, so all the crops died, the temperatures dropped. But I've seen a video recently, and I have to give credit where credit's due. There's a small channel who's been really pushing this, who inspired me on it. But he's saying the mud flood that we've been interpreting is more likely ash that has fallen, which has deposited and come down from the sky and buried everything. That's why
that can make sense.
That's why it's so uneven. And that's why it's like some places are deeper than others, and it's kind of like it's just mounds falling from the sky of molten earth in particle form just condensing on top of itself, and
Yeah.
it's more likely that way. It's not a mud flood. It's just raining down the darkness after the darkness, That makes sense. That could have buried all of Rome, right?
And can what's depicted as a volcano be like? Couldn't you imagine it being described as a mountain melting like wax?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, this explains the biochar, black rock. That's burnt up.
Yeah, the scorched earth. Yeah,
exactly. And it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, we saw the damage that Pompeii created. That's the mainstream understanding of a volcano destroying a city. But what if it was literally that was just one of the cities that was buried and destroyed during this judgment event? It wasn't just darkness, but people were dying instantly because of volcanoes suddenly erupting. And biblically based, one of our members of the community made a video basically explaining it seems like volcanoes didn't even exist until the first one in Pompeii.
There's no accounts before that.
It's curious, isn't it? That sounds like a tribulation style event to me.
Well, I mean, yeah. Again, this is like we live in a world where that's not uncommon. But but again, this is the most recent time because there's more time before that that it's never written about. Like ancient peoples would not have talked about something like that happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's got here an extended interpretation of this, what we read. It says, following this darkness, certain holy men throughout Syria and Mesopotamia began to exhibit transfigured bodies, their flesh incorruptible and luminous, particularly in darkness. In the monasteries of Mar Simeon Stylite, 7 monks were transformed simultaneously while praying, their bodies emitting sufficient light to illuminate the sanctuary without lamps. These transformed ones declared this event marked the beginning of the 1,000 years when the ancient enemy is chained, and they prophesied that after a millennium, the enemy would be loose for a time and a time and a half. They established communities in remote regions, particularly northward beyond the Caucasus, where they prepared sanctuaries for the faithful before the final loosings. This is a similar account to the one we read earlier, isn't it?
Yeah, sounds like it.
So is this a separate account where the same thing happened in a different place? As soon as they transformed, they said the message. This is the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. We're going to prepare a place for you. We've got 1,000 years to prepare. Basically, did they all just say that instantly when they were transformed as like a message translated directly from Jesus to whoever was around? And this is heavy stuff. Could you imagine witnessing that? No wonder, like I said, Christianity just spread. You've seen people flying around in light bodies suddenly going north. It's like, what was that? And it's kind of a bit of follow that, see what was going on over there, and it's kind of they're building these buildings all over the place to basically spread the message and take people in and as signposts to keep going further and further north. And look, I'm just thinking out loud here, but why is it that the more further north you go in Europe, especially, the more beautiful and advanced these buildings seem to get? And more condensed these buildings seem to get, especially in Europe. You start going to like Copenhagen, up into Denmark and then Norway, and these buildings are everywhere with this particular style. And then things start to get icy and murky and colder and weirder. So who knows what the landscape was like then, but today it's like a barrier's in place. You can't really go too far because you'll die because of the conditions. But it seems like there's like further north in the hemisphere you go, the more we see these advanced architectural styles.
You know what makes me think when you said that, Paul, is that we know, as I always send you guys all those articles about them digging up Roman stuff.
Yeah.
So what if, like what it says is like there's this place where, call it the mud flood or whatever. There's things that are buried up to 15 meters, 45 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if it was deeper, closer to Rome? And then the further away you got from Rome, it was not as deep.
Well, maybe. If only Gunnar Heisen was around, he'd probably know the answer to that.
I know, man. Like, that's the thing. Well, yeah, right. Because it's like that if you see like the depictions of what they were showing like Rome to look like in those pictures, Gunnar Heisen had these illustrations. They were literally farming in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mud and all the sediment, all the stuff was way up there. And that was like up into like the 1500s.
Mm-hmm.
So what if the further north you went, the less it was wrecked?
I think it seems that way because there's such a condensed amount of that type of architecture the further north. And I'm in the north of England. I'm as north as it can get next to Norway, and yeah, we are surrounded even the smallest cities have huge Romanesque pillared architecture everywhere, completely out of place. Like it shouldn't be here. Like, and we're given some silly story that some rich guy in the 1800s built it. I mean, within a year,
in a Renaissance style.
Exactly, yeah, something like that. And you look at this thing, it's like this thing looks 1,000 years old. Like it looks 1,000 years old. It's not new. This is not 200 years worth of weathering I'm looking at here. It's that type of stuff. But it still stands and it's still beautiful. It's incredible, and it's kind of. But again, you go further south, the Roman stuff is buried, and like I said, you're sending me articles every day. A new Roman city has just been uncovered, 13 foot beneath the ground. A new fresco, a new Roman bathhouse or something. It's just Rome was buried. It was just wiped off the map, like absolutely just decimated, like gone.
It's unreal, it's unreal. But I said it's funny, like without what they say, the brain is useless when the eyes can't see, like or the brain can't see. I can't remember what the exact say. When the mind is blind, because it's like nobody even stands to think what that means. Like they're reading about Rome in the Bible, and then literally there's news articles almost every single day. They accidentally dug up some Roman thing. Mm-hmm. Nobody even stops to ask, how did it get buried?
Mm-hmm. Didn't you just send me a link that a literal ship was underneath where the Twin Towers wreckage is? Was that you?
No, I didn't see that. Was that Adam?
Someone sent me the link in the Telegram. They've literally, they're digging under the wreckage of the Twin Towers and all this type of stuff. And they found an enormous, like, wooden ship, like a battleship, like a pirate ship style ship. You know what I mean?
That's just a weird place for it to be.
Under the ground, like deep underground. It's kind of, how did that get under there? A ship of all things. You know what I mean? It's kind of, the landscape is not what it used to be, is what I'm saying. Like something's happened here, like a ridiculous shift. And I can imagine a cataclysmic event would suddenly just make a ship crash into the land and get swept over with like land and like ash maybe or something, to the point where we built on top of the ruins and have no idea what's under our feet. We have no idea what's underneath us,
Right. So that's the thing to me, that as a conspiracy theorist, I would say the lack of historical evidence of whatever happened, to me, is proof of some kind of a cover-up, or they just don't want you to know it. And then the normies will just say, well, when did any of this stuff happen? It's like, I don't know, but I mean, like, what, like the physical evidence matters to me. That this stuff is buried. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense. Again, like if the Rome is mentioned as like the fourth beast in the book of Daniel, it got destroyed, like literally destroyed. Like fully destroyed. Some people say, oh, the Roman Empire never fell. Yes, it did. And it fell really, really hard. If you look over all their cities being under 15 meters of sediment, it's like, yes, it fell pretty badly. And it's like, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. They don't even try to, like I said, they don't even try to explain it. Don't even try.
Well, then the narrative would fall apart, wouldn't it? Just don't acknowledge. Just don't look. Yeah. I forget that. So go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
It was the Dark Ages. Nothing much happened then, so don't even worry about it.
Yeah. So at the end of the 1,000-year reign, I've gone through tons of different accounts that talk about mountains moving out of their place, quite literally. Oceans rising. But I have also read that, how this